Добрий день, я вітаю.
Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us. My name is Olga Tomanova and Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform continues its operation today. It's day 384 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by Russian occupiers, and now we will be talking about the situation in Kherson region. Joining us online is Yuriy Sobolevskyi, the first deputy head of Kherson Regional Council. Good afternoon, Mr. Yuriy. Good afternoon. Well, we've seen those daily reports of the general staff, and we are being horrified by this terrible number of shellings which the occupiers inflict on the Kherson region. So what's the situation for the time being? Well, unfortunately, the security situation is quite complicated for the time being. The enemy still has a possibility of shelling our territory from short distance using cannon, artillery, MLRS and mortar systems. We had 93 bombardments within the last day, and there were 419 shells that landed in our territory within the last 24 hours. One person died and 6 more were injured. Our armed forces performed counter-battery measures to the maximum extent possible. Our guys tried to establish the fire control over the positions of Russian army that launched those shellings against our communities. Do we understand it correct that the city of Kherson and its center is being shelled to? Well, not the center, but that there were shellings of the Kherson community. Yeah, that's correct. We've seen recently that there was a resolution about the change of the martial law, and those changes took effect yesterday. Can you tell us about the necessity why those changes were made? Well, yeah, we changed the schedule for the martial law, that's true. Unfortunately, we had no option of warning people beforehand, but there are objective reasons for that. We cannot give you a lot more comments about that. The regional military administration will provide the comments later, but there was an objective necessity for doing that. It's all aimed for ensuring the security of our people. So the curfew will be starting at 5 o'clock. Well, it's not gonna be happening for a long time. I think that shortly we will amend the schedule for the curfew, and shortly we will remove the necessity. Maybe you will have some advice for the residents of Kherson region. Maybe it's important not to go out in the street for that during that period. Well, you have to stay at home 100%, and you have to plan your day ahead so that during curfew you are near your families at your homes 100%, because the number of patrol teams is reinforced, and curfew is curfew. Obviously, no one will disturb the people who would stay outside, I mean our citizens, but that will be an additional load on the patrol teams. They will inspect those staying outside, and there will be consequences and liability for violation of the curfew. So please plan ahead, and again, stay at home 100%. I'm calling everybody to accept this fact with understanding, because there are really objective reasons for that. Mr. Yuriy, as to the situation with the critical infrastructure in the region, what about the energy supply, water supply? What is the situation for the time being? I can tell you the situation keeps improving on a day-to-day basis. Unfortunately, there are communities where we were not able to reestablish the gas, water and energy supply, but every single settlement is included in the relevant schedule of the repair works, and regional military administration understands when everything will be repaired. Unfortunately, it's still going to take some time because there are significant damages of the critical infrastructure, and the resources of the companies who perform the repair works are still limited, but where those repairs can be done in a prompt manner, I mean like energy power supply, sometimes we install the generators, and that helps us to reconnect those settlements to the water supply so that people have potable water. Another subject we wanted to talk to you about is the demining. We see that on a daily basis we keep losing people in Kherson region. Like recently, our servicemen of the state emergency service came across the landmines and perished due to the explosion, and civilians. So what works are being done in this regard? Yes, this problem is still of big scale, and it will continue existing after we liberate our territory from the orcs, and because unfortunately we have a vast area that we still need to make safe and secure. There is still a huge number of explosive devices which remain there unexploded, and it will take time and resources to recover all of our territory, but the wars are underway all the time. It's not only our teams, but also teams from other regions that work in Kherson region. They try to complete those works to maximum extent possible, and I want to call all the people not to use unfamiliar routes where you don't know for sure that the routes are safe, because the explosive devices may be installed by the orcs wherever you can imagine, and in no case you should touch those unexploded explosive devices, and because sometimes people try to do some manipulations with them and then they end up in the hospital in the best case scenario, and when sometimes the doctors can save their lives, but those situations can be avoided. If you see any suspicious objects, please report to police or state emergency service and warn those around you that there is an unexploded explosive device, because someone else may come across it and treat this situation in a different way and end up in very difficult circumstances, so to say. Mr. Yuriy, as to the people who reside still in Kherson and Kherson region, what are the challenges, the most difficult challenges they're facing? I mean, apart from the constant shellings, what do they have to work with, and what is the most actual currently? Well, in fact, the biggest problem is the security situation, because in a humanitarian sense we covered all the basic needs. The healthcare facilities and government services operate, the businesses keep coming back, the provision of food and medicines is on a decent level, but the security situation is still difficult. The shellings are incessant, and we keep installing the protective structures in the city, but again, I want to remind you, the more we have them, the better, because but still they don't guarantee 100% your security, because you need time to get into them, and it's not a missile strike. You only have seconds to get to those shelters in case of an attack. Dear colleagues, please proceed to the questions on the floor if we have any. Irina Momcher, Ukrinform, regarding the security situation in the city, there is information. If it's not true, please correct me. There is an information that Kherson is not included into the list of territories where the active warfare is still on, and it entails certain legislative things. If it's so, I mean, for example, Zaporizhia and Zaporizhia district is included in that list, and so if it's so, will the municipal government react in some way, or you want to address the central government with some requests or proposals in this regard? Well, look, this situation really exists, but it is the general staff who defines the territories where the active warfare is on, and there is already communication established between the central government and local governments. In this regard, I understand the position of the general staff. If we compare the intensity of the battles in our region and in other regions, well, there is some more intense activity of the military in other regions, but it still creates some inconveniences, so to say, for our people. And so this question has been solved for the time being, and I hope it will be solved shortly, just as well as the fact that there is a lot of applications in our regions that people cannot get registered as the internally displaced persons, and there are some technical problems solved by the Ministry of Digitalization. So the works are underway. Thank you. And in continuation, I know that the local government already addressed the central government regarding the restructuring or write-off of the utility bills for those whose dwellings are under occupation or under reconstruction. Is there any reaction or any resolution in this regard? Well, there is no resolution, but there is work underway by military administration, and relevant departments prepare the proposals for a cabinet of ministers as to the mechanisms how it should be happening. We will reinforce, so to say, our position in this regard, and I'm convinced that we should keep working until we get the necessary result, because it's the first of all the question of social justice, and secondly, if the mechanism is implemented, it will give the additional resource to the servicing companies to accomplish the repairing works, to get all of our communities reconnected to the utility services in the promptest manner possible. They don't bill anybody for the time being, and the level of payment in case of the billing is only 3%, and obviously such resources are not enough to procure new equipment, materials, and to perform some broad-scale works. So if we have this compensation mechanism from Cabinet of Ministers, such compensation, if it will be aimed at restoration of the region, it will increase the pace of recovery of our infrastructure. Thank you. And if I may, yet another question. On the social media, there are reports that in Novakhovka, the guerrillas blew up the so-called deputy of the occupational administration, and there is information that he was injured. Do you have any comment in this regard? Do you have any information about this? Well, usually we don't comment any activities of the guerrillas, but according to the information I have, really there was some activity of that kind, and he was really injured, and he is alive. This is what we know. Thank you. And yet the last question, if I may. On the left bank, the occupiers prepare so-called elections. How can you comment those intentions of theirs? And maybe you have any advice for the people who stay there under occupation? I'm convinced that this territory of ours will be liberated before this theater of absurd happens, and they understand it clearly. We see it. You know, the Reds start fleeing the ship, and the collaboration is of the mid-level. They try to flee the region, they try to leave for Crimea, but they're not being let out. Everything will be Ukraine there, so to say. If it happens tomorrow, I would advise our people to avoid any contacts to the most extent possible, any contacts with the collaborationists, with the occupiers. Do not become a part of those fake events. But first of all, we have to keep them safe and alive. If people are being forced, just like it happened in Kherson during that fake referendum, it doesn't matter if people take part in that show, because that's not elections, it's show. There will be no legal consequences for our people if it would be happening under pressure. But if somebody takes part in the organization of that show, we already have example when people who were taking part in organizing their referendums, they already received their notes of suspicion. That will be 100% crime. So please think for yourself. Mr. Yuriy, for our understanding, according to your estimates, what's the figure, what's our the number of our population in the occupied area? Are people evacuating or do they come back? Well, look, if we say about the deoccupied territory, it's not more than 30% of what we had before the war. In different communities, the statistics is different. In Kherson, the situation is one, and in the communities is different. The tendency is to the reduction because the security situation is very difficult, but some of the people keep coming back. They try to renew their business. It's really cool, but I still call everybody to remember that our main value is our people, their lives and health. So please wait a little bit more. Thank you, Mr. Yuriy, for finding time to join our broadcast. I'm reminding you, joining us was Yuriy Sobolevskyi, the first deputy head of Kherson Regional Council, and our next briefing is shortly at 1500. We will be talking to the representatives of Belarusian opposition about the situation over there, so bear with us, trust in our armed forces, and work together for our victory.